Okay, thank you. Members of the General Plan Steering Committee and the public, we're beginning a meeting of the General Plan Steering Committee. This is a study session on the draft circulation element. It has been quite some time since we've been able to come back to you. My apologies for that. We've had a number of issues with employee turnover and managing resources, as well as dealing with a lot of state law changes on ADUs and housing. We do want to get back to getting this general plan done for a number of reasons. But nonetheless, one very important reason is very soon we'll have to begin the process of updating the housing element. And it will be important for the city to have the general plan, the current land use that's planned in place. And as we work on the housing element, we'll need to come back to the general plan and make some adjustments, but it will be more readily achieved and better focus on the issue of housing, having the general plan completed. This has been a process going back to the Citizens Advisory Committee beginning in 2010, and then later work with the steering committee from 2000, I'd say around 15 through 2018. The consultants I have with us tonight are Leonard Charles. He's our consultant assisting us with the general plan update. Also tonight, I have David Parisi of Parisi and Associates, traffic engineers and planners. He is on the call here tonight, along with his assistant, Patrick Golier, who's been now helping us with some of the language and policies for the circulation element. They're really here in a capacity tonight to answer questions and I think weigh in. We're coming back to you with our first draft of edits to the CAC draft, to the Citizens Advisory Committee draft. And I think as we explained in this process, in the time between the initial CAC review and preparation of that draft to this point in time, there's been a number of significant changes both in transportation planning, transportation regulations, as well as a number of projects that have come online throughout the county and in Larkspur that were really important to fold into the circulation element. So with that, I'd like to first, I think I'll hand it over to Shannon. She's going to do a little housekeeping for yourselves and any members of the audience. And Shannon, do we have any audience at the meeting tonight?
Yes, 3 members of the public have joined us at the moment.
Okay, great.
So just a couple of housekeeping items. There is an advisory that due to shortages of electricity on the grid, there might be rolling blackouts throughout the region. So if we lose power and are unable to continue the meeting, we will be sending information through all of our usual streams about rescheduling that meeting. So if the meeting abruptly stops, our apologies. Thing is, Neil will be taking breaks either throughout the meeting or setting aside times for if members of the public would like to offer comment or ask questions. It looks like all the members of the public at the moment are logged in on either a phone or on a tablet or computer, in which case, please use the function that's either at the bottom of your screen or at the right-hand side to raise your hand, and I'll enable you to talk. It'll say allowed to talk, and then you'll have audio that'll come over on the meeting. If you're joining us by phone, it will be *9 to do the raise your hand feature on the phone. And that's about it.
Okay, and I think one of the first items that we always do at public meetings is to find out if there are public comments on anything that's not on the agenda tonight, not having to do with the circulation element of the general plan. So if there's any member of the public who wish to speak on something not on the agenda tonight, now is your opportunity.
All right, I believe Cindy Winter has a comment, and I'm going to enable the allow talk feature now. Cindy?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I do have an item that's not on the agenda, but it is very much related to the circulation element in general. So I thought I would delay it until I hear more from the planning director and the other experts who are here this evening, if that's all right.
And Cindy, I think that would be great. We are talking about the circulation element. So I think as there's an appropriate point, please raise your hand. As Shannon indicated, I will stop at certain points in time and ask for any public input and feedback. We're going to try to keep this largely a dialogue Q&A with the committee members, but we will certainly invite the public feedback, and we're looking for that from you. Thank you.
Okay, that was the only comment that I saw at this time.
Okay. So what I wanted to do quickly was go through a little bit of background. If the committee members do remember, we did hold a workshop on the transportation network. And I've got a holdup on this is the I was going to display the PowerPoint from that workshop, but what I'll do is quickly summarize, and if there are things you want to go back and look at, I can pull that up from the from my computer. Okay, I'm getting errors reading stream. Let me see if there's a better way to do this. Graph circulation. Let's just see if this works. Okay, that's working. Okay, well, what I did want to go through, I did send out to the committee members the minutes from the prior meeting and the workshop. And I think if you've had a chance to review that and look at the prior PowerPoint, I don't want to go through all that. We took about a 2-hour meeting going through those topics, but just to highlight, I think some of the key topics and takeaways that we emphasized and some of the things we got from the workshop are one of the main points being is that much of the traffic congestion in the arterials of Larkspur and Highway 101 and Sir Francis Drake and some of the spillover, the through traffic on Magnolia Avenue is largely due to regional and pass-through traffic. There's very little growth that's occurred in Larkspur that has actually contributed to the increases in traffic that we've seen over the last 20 to 30 years. So the concern of trying to limit development or limit traffic within the community did not seem to be solving the traffic issue that is being generated. And we talked about the emphasis on having a strong bicycle pedestrian master plan on putting forward multimodal alternatives and connectivity to transit. And at the time, the SMART train was under construction. It is now, again, obviously connected to Larkspur. There's also discussion about recognizing that the traffic caps and the circulation, the regulations that we have in place for circulation really tend to constrain our commercial vitality within the city. And there were a lot of examples wherein traffic studies and delays to allow changes in uses would often, or at least are requirements required in many cases, traffic studies and mitigations to simply change out commercial uses within existing centers. We discussed the concept of vehicle miles traveled versus LOS. Vehicle miles traveled becoming the new standard for planning and environmental for CEQA review, because reducing vehicle miles traveled is seen not primarily as a congestion management tool, but to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and in doing so also reduce traffic throughout the greater region. We talked about regional growth and the economy and changes in technology and how those affect local circulation in ways that are both good and bad, and certainly to an unknown degree as these things continually change. So in looking at the minutes, I just wanted to query the committee if you had any other thoughts or takeaways from that workshop, from the comments, any particular items that you remember that stood out to you that maybe wasn't captured in the minutes. And if you don't have an answer to that right now, you're certainly, if there's anything that comes to mind, you can let me know later.
Hi, Neil. I think, no, the minutes capture what we were talking about a couple of years ago and are appropriate. So I guess the question I had talked to you earlier is, are these still valid based upon current events and projected where we think we're going based on the dramatically changed landscape?
Yes, and I think if anything, what we're seeing is that certainly the economy will have, the economy does and will continue to have an effect. A hot economy will tend to create circulation issues or congestion issues. Regional growth may or may not contribute to that. And I'll talk about Plan Bay Area. The effort to try to link job and housing together to reduce VMT. But I think what we're seeing under the current conditions is that as opposed to transportation planning 20 or 30 years ago in the age of the automobile, where the automobile is very primary, particularly here in California, we're beginning to see that events will change pretty rapidly in various ways, both good and bad. And I think our takeaway is that the city has to work with the other regional plans and has to be responsive to and sort of a quick response to a lot of these changes, and be able to accommodate or encourage those that really create a benefit and deal with those that create problems. I might throw my one of my traffic consultants, David, on a little bit on the spot and say, do you have any thoughts relative to the summary of the workshop and kind of Monty's, and what Monty's getting at is, with the current pandemic and the downturn in the economy, there's, clearly it's having some significant effects on circulation, and to what degree do we plan for that? Or maybe Monty can kind of reframe the question.
I think, do we look at the changes being long enough term to they ought to be accommodated. And, perhaps the pandemic and what looks to be a potential economic downturn, maybe it's accelerating events that are a good thing. How much weight do we give it? And are there opportunities to take advantage of some possible make things less automobile centric, if that's a good thing or not? But wanted to put that out there for you.
I'll quickly.
Can I add to that before you respond?
Yeah, Daniel, can you turn up your sound a little bit?
I can. I'm trying not to be too loud. Is that good? Is that good?
That's better.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. If I could just add something to that before Mr. Parisi answers. With the pandemic, we're a little bit at cross purposes with regard to expanding the use of public transit because, for the last several months, people have been discouraged from using it in order to stem the propagation of the virus. Do we expect there to be pushback in terms of investment in public transit? Because maybe people will turn or the authorities will turn gun shy with regard to adding that infrastructure because ridership, having been greatly encouraged, has been discouraged for the last 6 months. So I just wanted to add that to the mix.
Yeah, our thoughts are. It's too early to tell any of this right now. It's just been a few months, really. In my 35 years in this industry, we've seen a lot of things happen with recessions, peak oil fears, and then electric cars. Traffic went down 60% on Sir Francis Drake right after the pandemic started. It's only 20% down now. At factory peak times, it's only 5% lower than the peak. So, we're watching what's going on. There's some exciting things as far as shifting to other modes and seeing what's going to happen. There's some scary things with funding for transit, and that's going to take a long time to recover. We just don't know. But what we'll do and can do in the general plan is kind of put bookends on things and just keep an eye on the trends. Patrick, is there anything you want to add to that?
The only thing I would add that's only tangentially related to public transit is that no one knows big picture how many people will be going back to offices. So the effects on long-term effects on traffic are really unknown at this point. It may have the effect of spreading traffic out over the day rather than the two distinct peaks that are what we know, the morning and the afternoon peak. But again, as David said, it's pretty early.
Well, we're keeping an eye on it. That's what we do for a living. So it's going to be interesting. For other general plans and other work we've been doing, and we're forecasting out for 20 plus years. We're looking at the current, the pre-COVID trends. And as Neil said earlier, traffic, except on 101 in Marin, has not been growing that much. It's at less than 0.5% per year. And most likely, and other general planning work, we've kind of stuck with that assumption, but we've also looked at what if it's a slower growth or a faster growth. And then also, I'm glad Cindy Winter's on the phone because she's an advocate for alternative modes. And Marin's doing a great job there, and that's something that's a big part of the circulation element. So again, we'll be looking at all this as part of the plan and keep on pushing it as we go through the process.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts on the prior presentation, or does anyone want to? I might pull up the PowerPoint just because it has some diagrams. If we need to refer to it, I'll pull that out. But if there's any diagrams, we do have the circulation system and some of the traffic levels, if you remember. I had sent that out to you guys. So if anybody wants that to go up, I can pull that up for you. Okay, with that, I'm going to change over to the economic, okay, hold on, let's see. Let me pull up. Well, for the economic resiliency meeting, sorry, some of this Adobe is not keeping these documents handy. I can pull them out if I need them. For the economic resiliency meeting, which I'd sent out those minutes earlier today. So I apologize for not getting those to you sooner. And again, I can pull those up. What we really talked about and had discussion with some of the property owners of our shopping centers was recognizing that there's been a major decline in traditional retail due to e-commerce. And this is prior to the COVID pandemic. What we're seeing is that the pandemic is really simply accelerating the trend towards more e-commerce as a solution. But we're also seeing, while there's perceptively going to be less demand for big box stores and traditional retail, I think you can see out in the neighborhoods and the desire for, while many restaurants have closed under these conditions, there is a strong effort to try to keep local restaurants and services active and activated through outdoor dining, through whatever measures can be done to try to keep some of those services, and whether they're really needed, necessary day-to-day personal services, or simply what we call experiential commercial uses, just enjoying a good, nice evening out dining, different types of foods, different types of experiences. The trend is towards commercial areas that are places of sharing and gathering and activity more than just large shopping. So that has some impact, and from a economic point of view in terms of traditional revenues, but certainly for the quality of life in the community, there's going to be a continuing need for commercial centers. And we do know that some of our commercial centers function basically as downtowns. While our downtown is kind of the primary downtown for Larkspur, we know that North Magnolia provides a lot of goods and services for the community. We know that Bon Air is really the downtown for the Greenbrae area. And even the area, I believe the area along the Redwood Highway frontage, while that is more of a highway frontage road, it still provides a lot of goods and services for the people in Larkspur and for locals who live in and near that area, particularly in the mobile home sites. So there's certainly value in nurturing and keeping those types of uses, and we'll likely see those continue to be in demand into the future. And so the result of a lot of that discussion was a need to be more flexible and accommodating to new commercial uses, particularly reuse of sites, and recognizing that a lot of these obstacles that are created through a lot of conditional use review, traffic analysis, and studies, these create delays that really eliminate the opportunities, particularly for small local serving businesses that don't have a great margin of profit. Larger box stores can usually afford those types of studies and those time delays, but we recognize we almost lost a certain couple of restaurants in Bon Air Shopping Center simply because of the hoops that they really had to go through under our code. And the other topic I think that was recognize there is a centers recognize that they could provide opportunities for housing near transit. And, but they are concerned with their image and the feedback from customers on that topic. So we do recognize that's a little bit of a sensitive issue because first and foremost right now, they are commercial centers with serving their customers and clientele. So if you'd like, I could pull out the minutes of that. If anyone had any questions on it, we could certainly carry that over to the next meeting for a final review.
So Neil,
Yes.
I just had a comment on this section. I think I remember our conversation when we discussed how important it was, particularly for the North Magnolia area, which has been economically underrepresented for a while, that they're really to encourage the minimizing of hoops, as you say, to jump through for businesses. I think now it's even more imperative that we do that because we're going to lose the COVID-19 in the year to two from now. More and more businesses will likely close that can't accommodate the distance requirements. And I think as a general idea, we need to create every opportunity and incentive to keep our small businesses afloat. So whatever we can do to encourage that in our general plan language, I'm encouraging that. We're lucky to have our three main malls being family or small business or owned by local residents. But they're going to be losing businesses probably in the next 6 to 8 months. That the more we can encourage new businesses to come in when it's possible, I think the better for all of us. So however we put that in there, the rest of the committee agree on that?
I would agree on that, I would maybe go a step further and go, if there are existing businesses that could benefit from some reduction in regulations that were offering new business opportunities, they should be afforded that as well, such as outdoor dining and things like that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what Catherine had to say. I would add another thing is that certainly a lot of economic activity over the last 6 months has been concentrated even further than would have normally been the case in e-commerce. And so local businesses, of course, are getting this double whammy. I would hope that in the plan we would have some kind of a provision to encourage some kind of renaissance of local business operations once we're out of the pandemic, either bringing businesses that have had to close back or perhaps replacement businesses. But there could eventually be a backlash against the sort of extreme concentration of retail into the hands of a very few number of entities. Not that I want to name any names. Let your imagination wander.
Okay, any other thoughts on economic resiliency? I think you saw the article I sent out a couple of weeks ago, which to me kind of summed up, and I think getting to Monty's point about the changes, that we're currently facing, and how does that play into what our discussions were, back in these two workshops. And I think it just kind of sharpens the topic, sharpens the points that we were making and the comments that we heard, that our current general plan, and I think I kind of would phrase it this way, our current general plan and zoning really takes commercial use somewhat for granted. And there's an expectation that commercial is going to come in, and it needs to be controlled and managed to a very high degree. And I understand that to be the case, to have been the case, and maybe was a need in the community for a while. But given the evolution of our economy, I think what I'm hearing here is affirms what we're saying is we really need to do what we can to take the to give the local commercial property owners and the commercial businesses real opportunities and avenues to help businesses to be successful, particularly those businesses that may be, have thinner margins, but provide important services for the community, whether it's grocery stores, food and beverage retail, or other types of personal services that people need on a daily or weekly basis. So any other thoughts on that? And I might ask, if not from the committee, is there anyone from the public who has any other comments on before we get into the draft circulation element itself, the draft that we've started on? Any other comments on the 2 workshops from the public?
See a hand raised from Cindy Winter. I'm going to enable the allow to talk function. Cindy, you should be good to go. Cindy, please unmute yourself. I think you're muted.
There we go.
Perfect.
This is somewhat related to the businesses at Marin Country Mart. But first, I just want to say that this is an amazing planning document that has been all marked up and rearranged, but it reflects so much hard work and thought that I am awed. And I thank everyone who brought it to this advanced stage. Second, and here's the main topic that I want to speak about this evening. MTC's Plan Bay Area 2050 in draft form calls for a new parking garage at Larkspur Landing sometime during the 2020 to 2035 segment. 72 million has been tentatively approved for this purchase or for building it. I know such a parking garage has been on many people's radar for a long time, but times are changing and the question must be asked, how well used would it be for the next 70 to 75 years, which is the lifespan of a parking garage? Here are some factors tending to diminish its use. Efforts to follow the new CEQA law in favor of fewer vehicle miles traveled. Sea level rise and flooding of low-lying parts of 101 and East Sir Francis Drake, resulting in less driving, more working from home, and thus less ferry use, more shopping from home, growing use of robo-jitneys, a new form of microtransit, decreasing the demand for accessory parking, and surging sales of e-bikes. That land might be better used for affordable housing. There will be an increased need for housing density in areas that are defensible from wildfires and flooding. Is this location defensible from flooding? If that 72 million is approved next year, as it probably will be, then I would hope to see a deliberate and concerted effort by city leaders to call on expert advice to help analyze the pros and cons. There are too many unknowns, too long a time span for this to be a hasty decision. If it should be determined that this new parking garage is an absolute must, then it should be of an architectural design that enables its adaptation later to housing and other purposes. That would cost some 10 to 15% more, but think of it as an insurance premium against diminishment of use and less parking income over time. I provide one possible San Francisco architectural source of consultation in a written comment to MTC dated August 8th, which comment I'll forward to our planning director. And that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. That's and we are aware of, I think that's part of the regional transportation planning, RTP document. And it is that you make some very interesting and some good points about the viability of that use as for a garage and some of the impacts that might result from that. Any other comments on that before we get into the intro?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. And so quickly for the committee, I'm going to go through and I apologize for not having put together more of a memo document, but I think we're all trying to get this going and get this project back on track. And so I'm going to go through some changes to the introduction. And if you have with you the introduction, we modified it to such a degree it really didn't fit as a track changes. And I'll highlight sort of what we've added to the document to basically enhance and expand on the introduction. So there is a stronger emphasis on complete streets, what that means and how it is pervasive throughout the circulation element, not simply a one concept kind of referenced, but rather it is a guiding principle throughout much of the circulation element and other parts of the general plan as well, particularly in land use. And then in the guiding principles, we talked about regional planning efforts. And so this part about needs of all system users, again, it's kind of reflecting complete streets. Traffic congestion, we talked about future traffic congestion, kind of brought that up to date with current understanding of how the city has jurisdiction and how we interact. Most of our major arterials are connected to other communities up and down Highway 101 and the Sir Francis Drake corridor. And we talk about the effort to minimize congestion and reduce overall vehicle miles traveled. And the need to work with both TAM and other jurisdictions. And we talk about the whole regional approach to planning. And this goes into what Cindy was actually just mentioning. The guidelines require that our circulation element align with other regional goals, particularly the sustainable community strategy. And the sustainable community strategy for Larkspur, Marin County, and the Bay Area is the Plan Bay Area project that is overseen by ABAG and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I'm sorry, we spelled committee, but it's really commission. They oversee the development of our regional transportation plan, and that's where significant transportation projects are identified for future development and where funding is created for that. And with that, the sustainable community strategy is the land use and transportation plan met to align with the RTP in order to meet adopted targets for GHG reduction. It's a very forward-thinking document. Currently, the current Plan Bay Area goes to the year 2040. However, MTC is currently working on an update to this, which would be Plan Bay Area 2050. And that will be coming out over the next year or two, I believe. But that is in process. So that's a long-term plan that we do need to align with. And right now, we do feel we're well aligned with Plan Bay Area 2040 under our current general plan, land use densities and job growth. And so part of this, we talk about the regional plan is really seeking to reduce GHG emissions and reduce vehicle miles traveled. And then we also work with TAM and other communities on localized plans and transportation efforts, particularly for not just roadways, but for bicycle connectivity as well. And without going into a lot of detail, we've updated the more recent public transit projects that have occurred that really inform our network. And we talk about how land use decisions can affect circulation and vice versa, and the need for residential development to meet the regional housing need, how land use can be identified and located in ways to reduce the number and length of trips to meet the regional and state targets of the MT. And by doing that by placing new residential development at or near retail services and transportation hubs, which for better or worse, Larkspur has plenty. We've got transit up and down the San Francisco Drake corridor, Magnolia, Doherty, and of course, Highway 101, as well as the train and the ferry, the smart train and the ferry.
Neil, can I ask a question on this section? I recall when we had this discussion a couple of years ago, there was more discussion about ride-sharing companies and you as a form of transit, and the need to develop the, I think this was a public comment if I see in here, the need to recognize the developing of infrastructure that supports the ride-share safe drop-off and pickup. Did I remember that? And maybe it's in our notes here earlier, but that we had considered that as an ongoing and growing level of transit or transportation, and that the need to recognize the safety situation was something we talked about. Anybody else remember that?
Yeah, and I think down in, what we added to this, and I think I'll kind of run through real quick, is aside from addressing the economy, climate change, and those impacts, I'm going to go down below. In the introduction here, we do talk about emerging technologies, which includes transportation network companies that or ride shares that currently provide convenience. And I think what you might be wanting to get at is in our policies, and it may be overlooked, maybe we need a policy that is a bit more, provides more clarity as to, or an action program to include ride sharing facilities as a stronger element of, maybe as an aspect of complete streets, or certainly improvements, multimodal improvements. I might have David or Patrick sort of comment on this, on the situation with the ride sharing companies. We know that they provide a benefit in terms of reducing parking demand and freeing up parking area, parking land. They have tended to have an impact on increasing, to some degree, increasing congestion or VMT. David, or Patrick, do you want to expand on that? And I'm not sure this is exactly topical to what Catherine's saying, but what she is indicating is that they're, at least for the purpose of circulation, of assisting in circulation, that having available or convenient rideshare facilities is probably a good idea. Is that correct, Catherine? Or where you're?
I was just recalling I may have been Cindy who brought it up at, just recalling the conversation about, many cities are developing, knowing that people will be using rideshare. They don't want them to stop and drop off or pick up a passenger in the middle of the road surface. And so they're creating either loading zones or carve out areas so that a passenger can enter and exit in a more safe manner.
Yeah.
Than stopping in the middle of Magnolia and letting people jump in and jump out. So I just recall us thinking about that at the last meeting in regards to our future transportation needs. Might just go in a different section.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good
Patrick,
point.
you want to talk about curbside management and some of there's actually people that just do what they call curbside management now in transportation departments. And Patrick, maybe you want to talk about some of the trends. And
does that fit in this section, or should it remain in some other section?
I think maybe a goal or policy, right, Patrick?
I think it should be a goal of policy, yeah, to work with the companies to identify perhaps where these rideshare rides are, picking up and dropping off, particularly in the downtown area. It does come down to curbside management and maybe considering different uses for the curb other than parking, where we know that there are large concentrations of pickups and drop-offs. The problem is that Larkspur would have no control over these companies. The state does. So there's no way to regulate it, and there's no way to get these companies to work with the city. So there's some challenges. Previous job was in San Francisco, where that's obviously a huge issue. And the companies Uber and Lyft would not share their data, and they weren't required to. So, but adding it as a policy is a great goal.
Because I would think, for one, it would fall under a policy or an action program under our multimodal transportation. I don't know if that's multimodal because you're back to vehicles. But it would be there. And I think it's a question of, do we have locations that are where you have clear, like a terminal or something, they clearly have designated locations for pickup and drop off, and the smart station would probably want to have that as well. But it may be more difficult where you have sort of a continuous commercial zones, and certainly the shopping centers could try to manage that on their own to some degree.
I don't want to belabor it, but that's a good explanation. Thank you. So we can move on. I don't want to belabor that one.
But I think it certainly is. This is the part of the introduction is not. We're not really identifying particular policies or programs, but kind of just giving some framework of the overall. What was it to do? It was here.
It is a valid point, though. I mean, there are definitely safety implications with these vehicles just stopping in the middle of a lane or pulling over in a bike lane. So it is a valid concern and something to keep in mind as this continues to get developed.
I think it almost adds as one of those, be flexible and be responsive to changing technology, and it may be that we're, if we see this become prevalent enough and it starts becoming a nuisance or an issue, the city does look to designate locations. These are really just guiding principles, so it's pretty general at this point. And then I sent separately the actual goals and policies and action programs, which I'll go through next.
Neil, just with regard to that last point, there's also a VMT implication of the expansion of the use of rideshare services. Since I think one of the numbers is that 1 mile traveled in an individual's car equates to 1.6 miles if it's in a ride-share service, because they're basically spinning around the neighborhood waiting for their next job. So there are VMT implications for all of this. So anything that could be done in the plan to compress the impact on VMT of be it rideshare services or other like services would be a good idea.
They say that's the case with the type of cars that, the driverless cars, that could even proliferate under that condition. People stop owning cars, and there's always cars running around without people in them, right? Ride share. So just causing the VMT. So I think you're right. The 1.6 to 1 ratio, Daniel, is what we're hearing.
I'm getting messages from Kevin Haroff that he is attempting to join the meeting. And I think I'm asking Shannon to give him some help if she can assist. Okay, so any questions on the introduction here? Any thoughts or?
You're going to go through it for typos. There's a few I see, but that's.
Yeah, we'll give it a better look over. We haven't really done what I'd call a copy editor proofreading on
Okay.
these. It's
Never
all
mind.
in pretty draft form. If you see anything that is contextually a problem, please let me know if you think there's something that's not clear or as opposed to a typo. But we'll give this a better approach. This is, again, sort of a work in progress, but it's come a long ways. I guess I'd put it this way. We're about 80%, 85% design, to use a engineering term. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead to does the public have any questions on this introduction as opposed to the CAC draft? And I'll note the CAC draft the introduction was about 1.5 pages. So this is a lot more explanative regarding some of the current conditions and things we're looking at today that we've talked about.
Okay, I'm seeing no hands raised at this time, Neil.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to go to our circulation element. And this is not in a track change version, which is what I need to see. So I'm going to pull up another document. Hold on just a second. Okay. My apologies. It's a new system, and oh, here we go. All right, I'm going to go to this. Okay, here, can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, let me get my copy here. So what I'd like to do with the committee is to give you a little background. As we started really focusing on getting this back together, we hadn't quite completed some items, and we were initially going to focus a lot on resolving questions regarding kind of the outstanding questions regarding how we currently manage trip generation and level of service and regulate that through the general plan and regulate development and mitigate development through the general plan. And as that then informs the current zoning ordinance and the traffic cap standards, and have a discussion kind of focused between that and VMT and our other, the other ways of trying to mitigate traffic impacts. But in putting together the draft, it became clear that it was probably best to really flesh out all the other issues related and all the other topics, and particularly those topics related to multimodal transit options, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, and other regional planning efforts that have the potential to reduce or mitigate traffic or congestion from development, and other measures. I see we have our council member Haroff is joining us. Glad to see you.
You're muted,
Turn on
Kevin.
your sound.
I'm still trying to get my electronics to work here, so
There you go.
go forward.
There you go. Okay, so, and I figure we probably could go, let's see, we started at 6:30, and I think we can go for another maybe half hour to an hour. We'll try to get through as much as we can, and then we'll take this up again come the 31st and try to get it all wrapped up. So I want to be very open to any questions or issues that you maybe have not seen addressed, or you think needs more attention. And with that, I do want to say we still have some work to do regarding the sections on circulation 3 having to do with LOS and trip generation. So I'll kind of touch on that tonight, but what I want to really go through are more of the other parameters around circulation, see if we've addressed a lot of the concepts that we talked about during the workshop, and other things that we've kind of brought up in the introduction. So beginning with the first, under the section on quality of life, the first circulation goal is to really create a safe, efficient multimodal system. So we have a lot of focus, a lot of additional language on complete streets and what that means, and additional language on emphasis on regional planning efforts, Plan Bay Area, our collaboration with TAM and with the County of Marin and other jurisdictions to work on capacity improvements that are not disruptive to the community, work on improving the multimodal circulation system throughout the county as it connects through Larkspur. We've talked about having policies to reduce VMT, vehicle miles traveled, when reviewing development projects. And a lot of the policies to reduce VMT, a lot of the programs to do that are improvements or programs that really assist in getting people to use transportation other than single occupancy vehicles, particularly single occupancy vehicles. So there's a lot of discussion in here about multimodal transportation alternatives and improving our bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and then other programs that I'll kind of touch on as we come through this. So I'm going to go to, and then in this The second goal is to recognize the quality of life as and being more important and takes precedence over mobility of traffic. And so I think we've talked about this is a carryover goal from the original general plan that really seeks to make sure that Larkspur maintains its small town feel, that we're not allowing the mobility of traffic to overstep the quality of life in the community. And this is accomplished and can continue to be accomplished through really enhancing our bicycle and pedestrian master plan, our walkable community, and growing in ways where we're developing near transit, creating transit opportunities, and creating housing near services. And also, as we talked about with commercial development, encouraging those types of uses that are resident serving, assuring that we have in our land use decisions, assuring that we have a mix of commercial uses that are both supported by and support the local residential community. So I'm not going to go into each policy and program here. I'm just kind of touching on the general points. And let me see if there's anything, these are just sort of notes about how some of this has been, certain policies have been moved around to create a little more of a coherent flow to the document. We've reduced some of the goals and consolidated some of the concepts because the prior general plan, the circulation element was really pieced into a variety of concepts that or issues and topics that really overlap in a lot of ways. So we've tried to blend that overlap a little more so it's not repetitive or disjointed. Probably looks that way on the screen. So, but I think if you read it through and you see the clean version, you see a little more how it flows. And I think there are parts that could be still moved around a bit.
Neil, Neil, I've got a quick question for you. So
Yes,
in prior meetings, we've sort of annotated the text and sort of gone through the annotations with, and there's some are comments, some are simply questions or requests for clarification. Do you want to do that at a later date?
I'm sorry, could you say that? I didn't quite hear you.
I'm sorry. In past meetings, we've gone through the document, through the draft document, and sort of flags, specific things that we wanted to either comment on or ask questions about or ask for clarifications on. Would you rather do that at a subsequent meeting?
No, I think we can do that tonight. What I think I want to do real quickly is I'm going to highlight some points, and then we'll go sort of as in the document holistically, and then we can go back to the beginning and go through it. As I said, there are some spots that we haven't fully resolved. So I don't want to get too hung up on those topics until we've kind of got there. So let me kind of run through this real quickly, and then we can begin going through it through the sections. So basically, yeah, in the first circulation, we've really focused on complete streets and the bicycle pedestrian master plan. And funding mechanisms to support those. And talking about the quality of life over having precedence over mobility of traffic. That, again, we did not change a whole lot. We moved some topics out of here and rearranged it a little bit. For instance, Magnolia Avenue, not encouraging additional through traffic, we moved that to the discussion about Magnolia Avenue itself. One thing we did in here is added and this is an item that could fit under reducing congestion, because there is another section about reducing congestion, and it may be that this is more appropriate there. Adding the interest in cooperating with and encouraging the Transportation Authority, Caltrans, and City of Santa Fe to implement a direct connection to eastbound I-580 to reduce through traffic congestion on east of Francis Street. So that's an added policy. We moved the issue of the helipad facility down to the bottom of because it was sort of in the middle of vehicle traffic congestion discussion. So we've kind of moved that to the bottom.
Neil, could we talk about that one for a minute, or do you want to come back to that later?
You know, I'm happy to talk about that. It's kind of an orphan policy on its own. So
Yeah. I'm confused. I mean, obviously this is a multi-jurisdictional issue because, you know, we have the hospital, we have Marin County, we have our local interests, and I'm not quite sure that we have a cohesive policy about how the existing helicopters are being supported in that way. It's always scared the heck out of me to see these helicopters landing in Hal Brown Park with kids running around.
Scary.
So we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I think that's an issue for the community. I know that that's a priority for the hospital to have access for that. But to me, the way it's been conducted is not safe, and I don't want us to be viewed as supporting what I think might be considered to be an unsafe practice.
So I guess with that comment, is it because I think there's been debate whether Marin General Hospital should have a more fixed helicopter facility or should not be provided.
Which they've said that they weren't going to do in the past, and now they're almost completed with the build out of the hospital. I don't think there's a helipad there. I think they're still relying on the park, which is right across the street, which seems to be, to me, an inherently unsafe practice. So again, I just think this may be a policy that requires a little more thought.
Yeah, I think it crosses jurisdiction because obviously Marin General it's in the county, Hal Brown Park's in the county.
Yeah.
And if I understand, there's been the local community has been, for purposes of having a lot of helicopter transportation, has not been supportive of creating a more permanent type facility.
That has historically been true.
So this seems sort of like a compromise approach that doesn't encourage them to really use the helistop unless it's absolutely essential, is potentially the result.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on personal experience where I've seen helicopters landing in that park while kids are playing in playgrounds in close proximity to a whirling helicopter blade. That just doesn't seem like a good idea to me. I know it's convenient for the hospital, but again, this may require a larger discussion. Is really all I'm suggesting right now.
Yeah, and it may. I think it. I know we won't. It probably requires a discussion with the county.
With the county and the hospital.
Hospital to really find out what is the need and are there better options.
There have to be better options than having
Having a flight out into the
an operating helicopter within 20 or 30 feet of 5-year-olds running around. That's
Right.
just not a good idea.
I actually had annotated a question about that specifically. Has there ever been any discussion of having a contractual arrangement? Of course, it would have to involve the county because Marine General is on county jurisdiction. But having a contractual arrangement with the hospital, saying no, you cannot land here unless certain conditions have been satisfied.
You know, I think we're in over our head on this one because
Yeah.
there's a lot to care about.
This is a larger conversation, but
Yeah.
I don't. I'm a little concerned that we include a policy statement that could be viewed as supporting the continued use of Hal Brown Park, which many of our residents use on a daily basis. I was down there today as essentially a helicopter support facility. Just it doesn't seem right to me. But you know,
Can we table this one for? I mean, there's a
yeah,
lot because
that's fine.
I only have a half hour left, so let's.
And I do know this is the language that was adopted, and I don't remember if this is the exact same language from the 1990 general plan, but this was the language that was adopted, and I think there certainly was some discussion at the CAC on the topic, where I think the language of support and improve facility only to provide essential emergency transportation services was added by the CAC.
Yeah, and that's fine. And again, let's table this conversation for later. I don't even know if it needs to be in the circulation element, but it does need to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed with the hospital management and with the county because the current practices are just not safe.
Well, it may be important for the city to, whether it's through the general plan or some other policy statement, to be clear about where the position regarding the helicopter facility.
I would kind of like to just take this policy statement out and let's have a separate discussion about it.
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's see, where were we? So going through to policies 3 and 4, a lot of what we've done, we have talked about land use decisions, encouraging housing near transit, and encouraging local serving uses to reduce the amount of VMT and automobile trips. Now in here, I've got some notes for general plan discussion. And what I'd like to do is these topics is I do want to hold off on the LOS and the specific safety related improvements for now and kind of come back to this. Either we can come back and talk about it if we get to it later tonight or at our next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
With some direction. And one of the primary things we'll want to talk about is if we do keep LOS and LOS and trip generation caps or triggers for project review, what kind of projects are we going to do that for? Because I think we've been very clear we want to really take current development, current uses and commercial areas out of that mix and really just, if we do keep it, to focus it on significant new development or significant redevelopment. So it might be a matter of how we define that and how do we balance these two kind of competing values of level of service versus VMT. So the other thing we did do in here, and I do want to kind of hold off on project mitigations until we kind of get more into that topic, but what I do want to talk about, and I would be encouraged talking about tonight, is getting feedback on is we did add in here is a number of parking requirements that specifically kind of go towards parking management strategies, various strategies to try to reduce being vehicle-centric or parking-centric community with large or expansive parking lots, and see how we can try to make as efficient use of our existing parking as possible. So we've got several action programs in here that are fairly involved. I mean, there are things that would, whether through updating the zoning ordinance or engaging in a bit of a parking strategy programs, these the city would have to put some effort into working with property owners and really looking at how we allow or how we regulate parking in both existing and new commercial development or new residential development. But the idea here is to really try to recognize that we want to encourage less use of vehicles and have parking be as efficient as possible. So that was one topic here that I did want to highlight. We could certainly talk, this is really about trails and paths.
Wait, Neil, before you skip on, it's Kevin again. Before we skip off of parking, and if we need to come back to it, do we have anything in here that addresses what I think is a significant concern within the community, which is the increased use of on-street parking? And to try to require, particularly for new development, because that's probably all we can do. And I know there's a tension with what we're able to do and what the state is trying to do with some of the pieces of legislation that are working through their way through Sacramento. But I think it's a conversation we ought to have, because there is definitely seems to be a significant increase of on-street parking, which creates public safety risks that I don't think are helpful for our community.
Kevin, are you referring to people parking in front of their homes rather than in their driveways or in their garages? Or,
yes, right.
So residential on-street parking rather than on street parking. I see. Okay.
Right. No, I'm just because of where I live, I'm thinking more of my own particular community. There's been a significant increase on the use of on-street parking, and it's partly because people have lots of vehicles and they don't have any place to put them.
I don't know.
But it becomes a safety issue, particularly as you go up into the hills in Greenbrae. I just don't know how large fire trucks can get past some of these cars. So,
well, I think, and Patrick Collier, he can correct me if I'm wrong, he had provided these programs. And in fact, I think he had a program included which suggested studying how to encourage property owners to use their garages for parking rather than storage. Patrick,
right.
Is that? And
isn't that what a garage is for?
I did not include it in here.
Well, we've discussed
it seemed like it was being kind of a daunting effort.
Yeah, I think we discussed it at one time, and it's more common in Corte Madera that I've noticed is white striping certain residential streets that have minimal or limited emergency egress, and with only limiting parking to certain sections based on where the white striping is. We have that up on Wilson Way up at the top of the canyon because of the concern that Kevin just expressed about not too many residents parking not within their own property. Have we thought of considering looking at that, the striping for residential areas more?
Well, I guess the question would be, should we look at a program to do that, to be more pervasive in that? Because I believe we do that in the hillside areas, west of Magnolia. I'm not sure to what degree the fire department does that in other neighborhoods.
Well, I don't think it has to necessarily get in the general plan, but it is something that the new wildfire protection mitigation plan are looking at, is evacuation routing, and evacuation routes are going to include looking at minimizing the parking of on road surfaces that are hazardous.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump down real quick, because at the bottom under safety, we do talk about adequate emergency vehicle access in neighborhoods, and identify streets that are subject to constrained ingress or egress for emergency vehicle and create potential bottlenecks for evacuation. And the program includes implement street parking regulations, including citing and enforcement. And roadway improvements where needed. And I guess where I'm getting at is we're already doing this for a lot of the hillside areas in Madrone and Marina Vista. And I'm not sure exactly to what degree the fire department does this in conjunction with Public Works in other areas of the community. I don't think it's quite as aggressive, but they're not areas that, they're generally the streets that they do not recognize a constrained vehicle access.
So that I think, consistent with what Catherine is saying, I think that's something that we should take a look at. And again, I'm just reflecting on my own local circumstances here in Greenbrae, because the county's just on a resurfacing project on La Cuesta and other streets within their jurisdiction down in the flats, and they've done a lot of new striping. But their striping stops when it comes to the border at Larkspur, and we have some constrained, I'm living across from it, constrained intersections that that people take advantage of with their parking, where the striping program that the county has in fact implemented, which I think is positive, it comes to a stop when you transfer into our jurisdiction. So I think that's an issue that would be worth looking at further.
Okay, well, and I do think that I do not know to what degree in Greenbrae that they either do or don't apply this type of striping, but it would be it sounds like it would be certainly worthwhile in some of those areas where you do have more constrained streets.
The county has done a pretty good job with their resurfacing program in doing striping and actually putting up devices, little rubber posts, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I do think, actually, to kind of get back to one thing I learned from working with Public Works on a certain project that involved having no parking, is their preference is to install signage along streets where they don't allow parking on certain sides, rather than necessarily striping out the parking space. Simply identify those areas where parking's not allowed because of the maintenance issues.
That would be fine, and maybe even better. But I've noticed at our local intersection, people have been putting up their own, those little green plastic people saying slow down and things like that. And I think it should be more of a city responsibility to make sure that we're maintaining some integrity in the way in which we're posting or striping or taking actions that make it clear that there are just some places where it's just not appropriate for people to be parking their cars.
Right. Well, I think this program lends itself to doing that. And then it's a matter of
Maybe a matter of an ordinance.
Yeah, an ordinance and a public works project and part of the CIP, that they check those with the fire department. And I do think they're doing that to a large degree, but maybe haven't blanketed the city as much as they could have. Let me go back up to parking standards. So in terms of any other questions on parking or thoughts? And I think, again, this is something you could take a review through this and see if there's any particular questions or issues you might have.
Quick question, Neil. This is Monty. You've gone to the extent of talking about parking and encouraging bicycle parking. Would that also be an encouragement to provide charging for electric bikes, since those seem to be, just from my experience going through town, that they're almost the equivalent of the normal bicycles in the percentage of mix? And perhaps if there were charging stations, does that encourage them, or is that a moot point?
That's a very good observation. And as a bicyclist who does not use an electric bike, I have to say I'm rather perturbed by all these people on their e-bikes. I'm saying that very jokingly, of course. I think it's fantastic that we're seeing more people get on the bicycle, and I really had anticipated, I was very hopeful, and I think there are a lot of signs that e-bikes are going to could become a major source of very local, transportation for people, and particularly with our demographics. So that is a good observation, and I think one of the things we emphasize in here, which I was going to talk about later, is the need to expand facilities. I mean, look at the Bicycle Master Plan, not just as, well, we need to accommodate bikes as we've known them, but really we may need to accommodate bikes to a volume and level much larger than we've been used to. So with that, I might actually have Patrick or David weigh in on the issue of bike charging. I'm not really sure where the technologies are in terms of that particular. We're working so hard to get electric vehicle charging infrastructure built. I hadn't really paid attention to that.
I think it's a great observation. I've been holding off getting an electric bike, but I'm going to any day now. But yeah, I think it's something that's missing in here that we definitely should get in here. And if we haven't covered it well enough, that's just the whole bike parking and bike station, bike repair, right? Little bike shops that people can do it themselves. I mean, the electric bike, these are just taking off big time.
Well, and biking generally.
Biking generally, but in the e-bikes
Yeah,
biking generally. You can't even buy a bike right now.
No, I watch people go up the hill in front of my house all the time on an e-bike, and I'm jealous because they can do it and I couldn't on my bike. So
that's why I gotta get one. But that was a great observation.
And I do think, reiterating that, Kevin, is most people, even myself, I'm in fairly decent shape from riding once or twice a week. It would be hard to just go to work from the top of Greenbrae. That's a climb, and that's a steep downhill. But with an electric bike, that makes it very possible for not just bikers, but really anybody to be able to.
And motorized skateboards. I think that's what I'm going to get next.
One of those one wheels.
I want to be there when you take your inaugural ride.
Well,
I'm doing that in the dead of night, so don't worry about it.
A lot of these particular policies we're looking at are reflective of, it's really addressing vehicle parking and how to reduce the land committed to vehicle parking, both currently and through development in the future. So that's sort of these action programs and policies. And we could probably we'll take another deeper dive into it and make sure we're really addressing bicycle facilities thoroughly in both existing and proposed development.
Yeah, these policies all look really good, Neil. I thank you for addressing these issues.
Yeah, and thanks for David and Patrick. They've been working, as they said, they've been working on other general plans and circ elements. We're kind of riding the coattails of a lot of their work at this point. So transportation alternatives, and this is where we really added a lot. I think, of clarity about what they are, how they function, what's realistic, and really defined what the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan is supposed to do, and how it should be managed. So we're not trying to duplicate the detail and programs of the Bicycle Master Plan in the circulation element. What we are doing is using the circulation element to really drive the city to maintain and update its bicycle master plan in a way that both expands the bicycle and pedestrian network, but also assures we're in line for funding sources and using state-of-the-art design to improve our facilities and access to transit. And I think this is the area in here. We'll take a look, but there's different locations, but we'll certainly address. I think we could probably do a little more clarity about e-bikes and how they're going to expand the need for facilities. And here was our discussion. We talked about the historic stairways and improving these, really recognizing where we have paper streets that should be used, could be improved, and could potentially be used as an evacuation route. There are not many paper streets that we have that really would qualify for this, but there probably are a few. And it may be that we do the exercise of seeing what of these may be worthwhile to improve. And then this section we've enhanced to really talk about programs, alternative transportation solutions, and really wanted to add the language to collaborate with TAM, County and Marin, to study and implement TDM programs. These could be, a countywide TDM program could really serve as a launching point to create a more coordinated transit facilities and transit programs. And whether it's existing commercial centers or new development, use of TDM is probably going to be a really necessary step in reducing reliance on vehicles. What I think what was referred to earlier about the whether or not to have the parking lot at the SMART station. I think under current circumstances, one would argue there's a lot of need to have that parking lot. But if you had enough employers with strong TDM programs, there may be reasons not to add parking. I'm not making that argument per se, but TDM programs are hopefully a future launching point, again, to create a more coordinated transit programs, more coordinated systems to get people using transit. And I know that the other communities are interested in participating in a more countywide approach, because it is, none of the smaller cities really have the resources to manage a, what you might call a comprehensive and effective TDM program. So we talked about a few of the other programs that we enhanced here, and some emphasis on providing needs of all users, including low income and seniors and disabled and transit dependent persons. And then in talking about our connections to the freeway and our external and internal linkages. Oh, sorry, before I go there. This is the section also, and I'm not sure it's really located in the correct location. I want to revisit that, but encouraging local neighborhood and consumer services that can be safely and conveniently reached by pedestrians and bicyclists. So this is a point where the circulation element somewhat overlaps with land use, where we're sort of directing the tide between local serving uses and reducing traffic by encouraging whether it's food truck and mobile consumer surfaces and gathering places, or encouraging a mix of local resident serving uses over destination retail as a means of reducing traffic. And likewise, in the land use element, we would be implementing that as some zoning standards as well. And then in just talking about internal and external linkages, safe, we really wanted to add the word safe and convenient connections, as opposed to better. Safe and convenient connections to the Bryn Ferry, access for pedestrians and bicyclists over Cordemaneri Creek, using the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan to implement a lot of these linkages with adjacent communities. And these are some of the projects that we had that were initially identified in the in the CIC draft are actually projects that are detailed in the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. So we're taking those out. Those are actually getting done to some degree and in progress. So there was a circulation policy, obtain safe and convenient freeway access for Larkspur. As I indicated, we've reorganized it because this really fit within our internal and external linkages and having safe access. So we haven't eliminated these policy and programs. We've relocated them to prior goal. As well as this travel to and between retail areas, a lot of our goals are to encourage more pedestrian and bicycle mobility. So a lot of these goals were actually relocated to under goal number 6. As we got into Magnolia Avenue circulation, again, there's some overlap with some of the other goals and policies here, but it did seem worthwhile or important to identify the difference between downtown and the North Magnolia commercial areas and Magnolia Avenue as a thoroughfare a little differently than the way we treat the other arterials. and really recognize that it requires some special attention, special policies. So that's why we've retained this particular section and have added some policies that, again, these are sort of best practices for trying to create a walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment to really minimize the presence or the impact of vehicles and parking in these commercial areas. So these were provided by David and Patrick in their review of the draft, and seem to be good ideas to work towards, sort of values to work towards as there are improvements or development along the Magnolia corridor. So since we're on this particular topic, does the committee have any, did you get a look at these and have any thoughts or concerns?
I think the improvements are really valuable additions. I looked through this and I I really think they're going to add a better quality to what we've had before. So thank you, David, for doing that, and your team.
Yeah, and this is Kevin. I'm not thinking specifically about Magnolia, but I know that there have been a lot of safety-related improvements. I'm thinking in particular on South Alicio, where there are kind of concrete barriers that have been put up with some road hazard signage or postings. I think that's actually quite good. And I appreciate the contribution you guys have made to making us think through that. It's slowed traffic down on those streets quite a lot.
Yeah, David's been very involved with Public Works on the crosswalk improvements and the redesign at Madrone Avenue at the entrance of Madrone. So he's very familiar with our thoroughfare.
Well, and I'm thinking in particular on South Alicio. They're essentially new concrete islands in the vicinity of intersections, and that has made, it hasn't slowed traffic down because there's not that much traffic on those streets, but it has made it safer and I think more comfortable for pedestrians and for bicyclists. And I think it's a model that we should be following elsewhere in our community.
It's good to hear that. Your public works department's been pretty proactive.
Those are pretty substantial concrete islands they've been putting up there. So there's no way in the world I'm going to run my car over them.
Please don't.
Okay, so I think most of that I've kind of covered a lot of the sort of, I think, more traffic congestion oriented policies, and without diving too deep into LOS and development standards, I thought I might go back to where Daniel was. It's a little after 8. Maybe see if just page by page, if people have comments, or if you'd like to do it that way, or Daniel, do you have
Well,
any?
a lot of the comments I have been covered. I don't want to get too much into to wordsmithing. So let me just, so we can do page by page, I think.
And one thing to keep in mind too, as I said, this is kind of a working draft. I know
Yeah.
the numbers haven't all been aligned, and there probably are a few typos.
No, it's not type. There's some some clarifications and some word choices and things like that
Sure.
that I had annotated, but you might not want to do that right now, because it gets close to wordsmithing. I don't know if you want to do that. The couple of more substantive things that I did want to point out, specifically since you addressed the East Sir Francis Drake from in the vicinity of the ferry building and toward the bridge, there is a substantially large number of residents who live around Larkspur Landing Circle, and then of course there's that newer development a little bit further east, and ingress and egress during high traffic hours, and there are many of them in that area, has to be very difficult for those residents. And I'm wondering if there should be anything in here particularly about emergency ingress and egress in those areas. So that's one thing that caught my eye.
So let me make sure I understand the point of the question. And you're talking about the residents who live on Larkspur Landing Circle and all the multifamily development
Yes.
in that area. Okay.
In that area, and then further east, up in the hill further east.
Yeah.
That newer development.
Drake's Landing or whatever it's called.
Drake's Cove.
Drake's Cove. Right.
Drake's Cove. Yeah. So when I go by there, I said, "My gosh, I would not want to be here. I would not be a resident in case of an emergency or an emergency evacuation, because ingress and egress in that area is very, very tight." So I don't know if that's something that you would want to address there when you're addressing the other issues surrounding that particular area.
Now, by emergency ingress and egress, you mean the roads that serve those?
Yeah, I mean, there's only one way in, one way out.
Okay.
So
of the Larkspur Landing Circle?
yeah, if in case of emergency evacuation, to actually leave the area.
Well, and the Drake's Cove development is even more of a concern, I think, because
and then for emergency vehicles also to get up, just get through the traffic, which is heavy for a large part of the day.
Well, I'm going to pull in David in a second, but one thing I do want to let the committee know is that the Drake's Cove development is planned to connect to Larkspur Landing Circle. There is a requirement for a spine road to connect through there, but as it is standing right now, it's limited to the one entrance, and it doesn't have good pedestrian access even.
I don't think it has any pedestrian access.
That
secondary route depends upon what the sanitary district does with its property, because doesn't that require an opportunity to move across that property, and they haven't done anything yet.
Right. It is a standard. It is a requirement for the development currently, and would probably carry over into any future development. But until that development happens, or until the sanitary district decides to go ahead and put in a road, that connection didn't occur.
Might be worthwhile giving a little more thought to including, since this is a general planning document, some language that recognizes the importance of that additional access to that community.
Right.
I concur with that. Then sort of continuing down the document.
Just quickly before you go on, David, Daniel's point about emergency access into Larkspur Landing, maybe Daniel, is that because largely of the traffic issues when the traffic
it's so congested around there that if anybody's in a hurry, particularly somebody in an ambulance, I mean, it could be a real problem.
That's a really good question. I think the general plan promotes the 580-101 connector, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, in addition, I wonder if we should brainstorm a little bit about what we want East Sir Francis Drake to be, right? At the end of let's say that project gets built or it doesn't. East Sir Francis Drake, I think, is carrying 50,000 cars a day. Right?
Yep.
A lot of regional traffic. If a lot of that is relieved, what do we want the street to be? It's kind of rhetorical, but.
It might be worth, an expression of policy to manage that street in a way that's more consistent with, local community needs. I don't know what more we can say at this point until we actually have concrete plans about the connector up in San Rafael, and that's still a ways away.
Right. Or at least no more widening or no more capacity improvements on East Drake also in the meantime, right?
Well, and something along those lines, to plan for how we, and I think this is your point, how we see that road being utilized in support of our community going forward into the future. It should not be a major thoroughfare. And right now it's just handling a lot of traffic.
And David, with some of the plans that are in place, like we have extended the merging aisle to help create capacity. I mean, I think there's been some, and I'm not sure what else we might have in place in terms of the CIP or what San Rafael might have in place, recognizing we'd like to try to address the congestion issues under the current condition, yet there's a tension there because if we do improve the connection and just like creating a signal or a roundabout I'm trying to remember the name of the road that comes up from San Rafael and Sanitary District.
Anderson Drive.
Anderson, yeah. If we do anything that's really improving the flow of traffic there, on one hand, we're helping reduce the impact and the congestion that exists, yet the tension there is we're also increasing the capacity and potentially increasing the future of that continuing as a major thoroughfare.
Not only that, but there's a huge gap, right, from soon to be from Anderson to Remillard Park. There's no bike ped facilities.
Yeah.
Right. Huge gap. So I think this is something, Neil, I'm glad this group brought it up, that we should investigate a little bit further. Not only, how to relieve congestion for emergency services in the short term, but what it's going to be in the long term.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So do I.
Yeah, and I think if we look towards at trying to improve the pedestrian bicycle connection and reduce the vehicle capacity, that will be consistent with the other goals that we've kind of stated here.
And I really, I don't know that we need to be as specific about putting a roundabout in over at Anderson, but to me, that would accomplish a lot of different goals, really, in terms of managing traffic as well as improving the safety of that particular stretch of the road.
Just as a factoid, that intersection I think is owned by 3 entities. None of them are Larkspur. County, San Rafael, and Caltrans.
So where does our jurisdiction stop up there?
Right where the paving ends, just past Remillard Park, right before you head up the hill.
Oh, all right. Well, so that creates more of a challenge. But
David,
that's
do
okay.
you have insight on why? I mean, with the level of traffic, and I don't know, maybe that intersection, that stop sign is not. They did improve, I think, the turn lane a bit, but at some point a few years ago. But I'm a little surprised it hasn't been improved to a greater degree with some of the work that's been going on.
Yeah, it's really not, and they've been doing some work up there too, but it's not. It's still not a safe intersection.
Yeah, a little background. What they're doing right now is they're extending a 2-way bikeway from the overcrossing 580 up to Anderson, and that's where it's going to end.
Because they got some pretty big pieces of equipment up there digging around dirt.
No, they're putting a path in, and then that overcrossing that used to just have the 1-way bike lane, that's going to be a 2-way barrier separated bike lane. But the intersection, is in San Rafael's general plan. Patrick, we should go see what they're thinking about. Previously, they were talking about a traffic light, which wasn't well thought about, because if you had that, you're going to change the free flow condition into a red light occasionally.
Yeah.
Which means that whole overcrossing coming off the highway would have to be 2 lanes.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's the bowl of worms.
That's why a roundabout sounds a lot more.
Yeah.
If there's enough space for it.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was a bit of an issue with the space constraints to do a roundabout, but it could be.
Well, anyway, David, let's work with you and our neighbors to the north, and
Yeah.
we'll create a good solution for that problem.
Let me ask a question real quick, Neil. Who's the city's rep for the 580-101 project? The stakeholder group?
I think that might be Dan Hilmer.
Dan Hilmer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's our TAM rep, and
Hey, Neil, I'm going to have to sign off. I'm a house guest and they're waiting on me.
okay. Well, I think, we've gone to about 8:30 here.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Catherine.
The plan now is we're going to meet again. We were supposed to meet next Monday. We're not meeting next Monday.
Well, it may be valuable to go ahead and meet next Monday. I want to make sure I'm really,
Yeah, let's keep plunging along.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Meeting wasn't on my schedule, and now I have house guests, or I'm a house guest, and they're all waiting for me.
No, I think in the next meeting we can, we'll really go through this a little more fine-tooth comb, and we'll have a little more
No,
for you.
but this has been a good discussion.
And we'll let you go, Catherine, but before we leave, I want to
She's
check.
gone. She's
I
gone.
know a hand raised.
Yes. So Neil, we have a hand raised from Cindy Winter, and I'm going to go ahead and enable the allow to talk feature.
Okay.
Cindy, you should be good to go. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Right, I should be unmuted.
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Paragraph 1.1 point B. Implement and update the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan so that bikeways and multi-use paths shall be designed and operated to accommodate and encourage travel by pedestrians and bicyclists. With the advent of e-bikes, which are twice as heavy, at least, as an ordinary racing bike with no motor on it, they can do a lot of damage to pedestrians, whether seniors or young kids or people of any age. And pedestrians don't like them, and yet e-cyclists don't like to ride on the roads because they're scared of cars. So I think there are two solutions here. One is to create good bike lanes on the road that are well buffered, because I've read that a good buffer encourages more cyclists to use those lanes. And the other solution is to separate the pedestrians on these multi-use paths as much as possible. And I know both those suggestions are difficult to achieve in reality, but I think there should be a statement of principle that when possible, they should be designed into the infrastructure. So I would add a sentence saying that insofar as possible, pedestrians and cyclists should be kept separate. That, I think, would encourage more walking, and as cycling increases, I think it would create a safer path for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's my comment there.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, are there any other hands? I didn't see any.
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay.
So Neil, can I raise one quick comment
Okay.
or question?
Sure. But before you do that, I just wanted to give, I think Cindy made a good point, and I wanted to give
Oh yeah, sure. Fine.
David and Patrick, and I don't know if Patrick wants to comment on it now, but we'll need to think about that issue of separating, where it's appropriate to separate and how we can kind of deal with that tension. I think this is becoming a growing issue where traditionally it's been how do we get more people on bikes and how do we create more bikeways? And now that we're getting a lot more bikes, we're going to begin to see the bike pedestrian conflict become a little more apparent. So,
But for purposes of a planning document, I think we can put in some language to the extent practicable and things like
right.
that. And work out the details,
Okay, so you had a question.
depending upon the roadway that we're talking about. So unless somebody else wants to take it on, we refer in a variety of places in the document to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard.
Yes.
And of course, right now we're going through a process where that name may remain the same or it may change. And I have my own views about that, but which I don't need to express in this context. But because there is a real possibility that the name could change as a result of the larger discussions we're having with the other communities along the street, is there another way to refer to the road? Does it have like a state highway designation or something like that that we could use? Or are we just stuck with that name? David, you're on mute.
Oh, I was just shaking my head. I think it may have had a state highway reference years and years ago when it was first being planned, but no. That's an interesting question.
I mean,
Because there is a significant likelihood that I shouldn't say likelihood. There is a robust conversation that is going on about the naming of the street.
Committee? Is there a committee?
Yes, there is. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's kind of being driven by the county, but
Okay.
we're having a role in it because we've got East Sir Francis Drake, so we've got a say in that. Other communities also have a say. Not all communities are likely to be expressing the same perspectives. So we will be having a conversation about that. But it may be that, because I've encouraged us to march right along in that conversation and not just have a lot of talk. Let's make a decision about what the name is going to be. So it could be in the relatively near future that the name of the road will change or stay the same. But if it changes, then we've got a lot of references to a name of a street that won't really be recognizable.
Well,
So I'm looking for something else to refer it to, like the Great Marin East-West Highway or something. I don't know, something.
the East-West Arterial.
I think it may be helpful to think about that a little bit rather than embedding a name that may not be relevant going forward.
What's the timetable, Kevin?
So that's something we're kind of working through with the county, and I'm part of that. I'm part of the committee that is having that conversation. And as I said, I've stressed that the county likes to have talk sessions and thinking about things and bringing in different people, and that's all good. But I have really encouraged the county, and at the county level, it's Katie Race and Dennis Rodani because they have the jurisdiction over big chunks of the road. Our jurisdiction is a little bit less. But I've really encouraged us to have no more than like 1 or 2 talking sessions and then get down to making a decision. So I could actually see a decision being made before the end of the year.
Could the city just rename East Sir Francis Drake whatever you wanted to?
Yeah, I was going to ask that too.
So
like local streets go away.
One of the well, yeah, we could do that, but one of the things that we have done, and this was actually Katie's suggestion, is to bring in Dan Schwartz, our city manager, to kind of coordinate efforts with the different jurisdictions that are relevant to this process up and down the course of the boulevard. Because it's been my view, which I think is shared by the committee, that we should not be calling the street a different name depending upon where you are. We should have a consistent naming strategy for all the jurisdictions that are involved here. It originally was called the Alima Road. It could be called the Alima Highway, or it could be called something like that.
Well, the reason I asked that question is if the connector ever happens, wouldn't you want it, Drake, not to be considered the east-west highway through Marin? Especially the
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm not. I'm just I'm not suggesting that as an outcome. I actually think something more historical is appropriate for the name of the road. But there is some controversy about how that should happen.
Well,
But I do think it should end up being a consistent naming strategy for the entire roadway from our jurisdiction all the way out to Alima.
Yeah, one thing to think about, I think what David is getting at was the idea of visioning, whether the city wants to vision that stretch of what's now East Sir Francis Drake, as opposed to the rest is Sir Francis Drake, and it's the only part of Sir Francis Drake that actually has a different name.
Well, that's true, and I think that would be fine.
Whether we were to give that its own name to, I think David's point is to identify it differently than the corridor roadway, the thoroughfare known as Sir Francis.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and that's not a bad idea, and it actually might prompt some of our other communities to think a little more creatively about their participation in the overall naming process.
That's exactly what I was thinking, because let's say the connector comes in, right? And then what's the segment that's currently Sir Francis Drake, let's say we just shut it down capacity wise, and you want it to have a different purpose, right? Than what's Sir Francis Drake to the west. Maybe it would make sense to.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in those terms.
Reclaim it for the city's purposes.
That's worth thinking. Yeah, that's worth thinking about. I hadn't thought about it in those terms.
Okay, well, that's okay. Any Daniel or Monty, do you have anything more to add at this point? Or are you happy to come back on Monday?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back with other comments. They are actually fairly minor. The one last thing I might bring up, and that's in chapter 13 at the end, where we talk about limiting the exposure of circulation facilities to man-made and natural hazards. And then it occurs to me that for years there's been discussion about improving the interchange at Sir Francis Drake and Highway 101. At the same time, there's a stretch of road that leads up to that intersection, which is actually below grade, and could very well be underwater in 25 years. So do we want anything in the plan to specifically voice our preference that any improvements in that section of 101 be attentive to the risk of flooding, the increased risk of flooding on that section of 101, which is around where Warnham Drive is, in front of Trader Joe's.
David, I think that could be a specific action program to encourage Caltrans.
Yeah, so you're talking around Lucky Drive, where the dip is.
Yeah, the Lucky Drive area. Yeah.
So I think you should put it in here. Again, that needs to be addressed from sea level rise as well as just flooding.
Yeah.
TAM is leading a study right now for 12 interchanges, including that complex between Sir Francis Drake and Pfeiffer Industrial, and they will be looking at that. And obviously, sea level rise is a big deal, but I think it should be reinforced in this document.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah. So the rest of my comments, they're pretty minor. I think they can wait, particularly since you're going to be doing some further revisions to this text.
Yeah, but that last one was a good call, so that's important.
Yeah, we're going to look at some.
I wonder if there's are there other roads that we have, any other sea level rise issue areas, paths, roads. That's Neil. We just revisit that.
We just redid Doherty.
Yeah, Doherty's taken care of now, so we should be good. to go with that.
Well, I mean, there's a whole neighborhood around that, previous industrial area that's to the east of the highway.
Yeah,
And I
that's gonna.
think,
Yeah. But that's not so much of a
look-
circulation issue.
That's why I didn't bring it up. It's less of a circulation issue than
well,
anything.
circulation does include infrastructure and utilities to some degree in concept. And I think we'll look at how we can reasonably recognize that in connection with Lucky Drive. And we'll look at if there's other areas that, the challenge is when we talk about local roads, then a lot of the responsibility is on the community. If we're directing to raise, like say a neighborhood street, then we're kind of committing the community to mitigating that hazard for a local neighborhood. So there's a
Well,
bit
maybe
of,
we should just look at some of those sea level rise maps, Neil, and see how we can incorporate it somewhere in the general plan, because it'd be helpful, if you're ever going for grant opportunities and whatnot, that is
Yeah.
recognized, right? So,
it's certainly when it's done in conjunction with development or public works projects.
Yeah,
then-
in transportation. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, one other smaller item is that you make mention in the document about jitneys to connect people to transit hubs, and I didn't see anything that mentioned feeder buses, and I wonder if you want to include that as one of the elements to get people to the transit hubs.
Patrick may want to talk about this. I mean, this is where we just want to provide a menu, right? It could be transit buses or micro transit, right?
Because there have been feeder buses in the past. I mean, they after the financial crisis of 2008, they sort of went out the window. Except I guess there is one now connecting San Anselmo to the ferry terminal.
I think I think they've cut that out.
They cut that out again, yeah. So, but feeder buses could work into the equation.
And I think the Smart Train was using a feeder bus to get people from San Rafael, but now they've connected. But we'll look at how to, because I know we have some language regarding jitneys or creating a sort of a commercial circulation, but we're probably not clear about feeder buses particularly for commute.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Good.
Anything else for now?
Not for now. We'll come up with something
Okay.
later.
We'll come back. We'll continue through, and we'll have a bit more information for you come next Monday.
Thanks so much.
So David, has your team been working with the folks at the bridge? Because I know that intersection has been kind of reconfigured a little bit there. It's not part of the bridge, but it's right there.
Which one? Up at Richmond San Rafael?
Onto Magnolia, from Bon Air onto Magnolia.
Yeah, we've come up with some long-term plans that haven't been implemented. And I think in the meantime, we're brought out by Public Works to adjust the signal timing because nothing's responsive right now because there's no actuation is where things are at. So.
Oh, I wasn't thinking so much. I mean, I know that needs to be done. I was thinking more
you're talking
in terms
about
of the physical configuration of the intersection.
Yeah. There's I should talk to Julian, see where that's at, what stage they're at. It's such a long-term project.
They've been working on it. So.
Oh, okay. I should get out there. So they've been reconfiguring it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
If you haven't been out there in a while, you ought to go take a look.
It's been about 3 weeks, but looks different every time.
And then we had to take the crane and do other things with it more recently, which was fun and expensive.
Oh, wow.
I have to say, it just impresses me that they're able to do all that in that constrained space and keep the traffic moving as well as it has.
It really is impressive because it is a very constrained space. They've got a lot of steel out there that they have to use, a lot of other stuff, and yet the traffic continues to flow. And not really much in the way of traffic delays that I've been able to see. And I get out there all the time.
And the coolest thing was to me was when they bored that gigantic conduit underneath the creek, right? The AT&T thing.
Yeah.
You guys are
Well,
familiar with that was super cool.
I'm sure that was expensive too.
That was amazing.
Anyway, a good meeting. Thank you again for being a leader on this process, Neil. I know it takes a long time and it's been difficult for us to make rapid progress in this planning exercise,
Well,
given COVID and all that kind of stuff.
I'm glad you guys, thanks Monty and Daniel and you for coming back to it. And again, it's unfortunate you kind of get sidetracked and it's hard to really focus, and we're kind of back on it.
Yeah.
And David and Leonard, nobody's been, lagging. It's all been my own. I'm kind of the bottleneck, just trying to take care of a lot of.
You got a lot on your plate, and the fact that we've had a robust conversation about circulation, which is among the most important parts of the overall plan, we're making progress. So
Good.
Thank you.
Keep it going. Okay.
Everybody.
Thank you.
With
Thank you.
that, we'll call the meeting. Have a good night.
All right.
Talk
You
to
too.
next
Thanks,
Monday,
everybody.
6:30.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.